I welcome you all to this webinar on carbon markets exploiting the potential for Pakistan's green economy. For those of you who are social media savvy, we're using the following hashtags to follow along. Hashtag sustainable finance, hashtag carbon credits, hashtag Karandas Pakistan, and hashtag KRN webinar. The schedule for this webinar is as follows. We'll have opening remarks by Mr. Vakas, who's our CEO, and a keynote address by Mr. Salim Raza, who's Chairperson Karandas. Afterwards, in the course of this webinar, we'll have two panel discussions focusing on carbon markets in Pakistan. And before that, we'll have Ms. Maha Qasim, who will be showcasing the study findings via presentation. And hopefully, we'll have time for a Q&A session. And then we'll have closing remarks by Ms. Jo Moya, Development Director, FCDO. And to start off, I would like to welcome Mr. Waqasul Hassan to join us, who is CEO of Karandas, and he has a rich experience in designing and implementing a wide range of development finance programs on infrastructure finance, public-private partnerships, climate finance, MSME finance, credit guarantees, and digital finance. Over to you, Mr. Waqas.
Thank you very much, everybody, for staying with us. And sorry about this glitch. Assalamu alaikum and Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Mr. Salim Raza, Chairperson, Karandas Board. Ms. Aisha Hamara Chaudhary, Secretary, Ministry of Climate Change. Ms. Jo Moyer, Development Director, FCDO. Karandas colleagues, and no less important, the enthusiastic participants of this webinar. Good afternoon and Assalamu alaikum. I welcome you all to this webinar that Karandas has arranged for launch of the report on carbon credits trading landscape in Pakistan. It makes me very proud that Karandas commissioned this seminal work and has made a genuine attempt to holistically assess and present before you and wider audience carbon credit landscape in Pakistan. At Karandas, we take knowledge creation extremely seriously. It's one of the key tools we use to push frontiers in our core areas of practice. Karandas has a significant portfolio in climate change. The special feature of this portfolio are that we are not only invested in traditional renewable and solar energy, but have also financed smaller green ventures, recycling plastic and solid waste, commercializing innovative clean drinking water and clean air solutions, and introducing water-efficient agriculture. We have a diverse offer which comprises equity, commercial capital, as well as concessional financing dedicated for climate change results. The pursuit of green outcomes does not finish with Karandas, but each one of our subsidiaries, Infrazamin Pakistan, Pravas Financial Services, Pakistan Microfinance Investment Company, and National Credit Guarantee Company Limited, has green as part of its respective core strategy. I would like to share with you that Karandas has closed capital raise of first ever PKR denominated green bond of Pakistan, and we will soon be making public announcement with full details. It's a milestone not just for Karandas, but for the entire financial sector of Pakistan. On the subject today, that is carbon credits, speakers and panel members after me will speak in much more detail and perhaps with more authority and eloquence. I'll put before you only one metric. As per World Bank data, we have authentic, globally acceptable 3.1 million carbon credits only of a total of 5.7 billion credits issued. This is 0.05% of the total credits issued. The success of all relevant policies, paraphernalia of agencies, private sector efforts should be assessed against market share of carbon credits that we are able to generate and sell in the global market. It's Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, which defines mechanism for trading of carbon credits in both compliance and voluntary markets. The question we need to ask ourselves is, are we Article 6 ready? And this leads me to first of the three things that I want to highlight. The importance of capacities. Carbon markets offer a powerful mechanism for availing of financial incentives to reduce emissions. The global carbon market was valued at $821 billion in 2023, with projections reaching $1.75 trillion by 2030. For Pakistan, this presents a tremendous opportunity to secure climate finance while accelerating its transition to a low carbon economy. This will, however, not be possible without creation of capacities which can develop and implement projects on ground. Savvy investors who can outsmart our competitors in structuring and executing low-cost yet robust carbon emission reduction solutions. Second and related point is what Paris Agreement actually signifies, and we need to take note of. It's a bold climate pact which brought almost whole of the world together regardless of their historical role in climate change. Defined a common goal of keeping global temperatures from rising more than 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and if we can, hold it to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And created a single playbook, this is quite important, defining mechanism to achieve this goal. This is phenomenal. The other side of this mechanism is, however, very interesting. It is that each country has to compete with every other country for development of robust projects which generate low-cost carbon credits and are verifiable against a common international standard and can withstand the high bars of integrity. I'm sure colleagues are aware of the integrity drive in the voluntary carbon markets. We would need to be good salesmen too, creating partnerships such as done by Ghana with Switzerland, enabling to introduce water-efficient agri-practices for 80% of its rice cultivation, whilst at the same time claiming carbon credits revenue from Switzerland. Third and important thing is sense of timing. And I would repeat, the sense of timing we need to have as a businessman does for his merchandise. Climate change is real, so is global commitment. Paris Agreement, and speaking more specifically, Article 6, are an articulation of this commitment. However, there are trends which should be kept in mind as a businessman does. Most countries have committed to achieve significant part of their targets by 2030s. This means the demand for carbon credits would surge in years to come. The same credits may just fetch more price. Not all tons of carbon dioxide are reduced equally, nor are all priced the same. The market is evolving, but attributes or co-benefits which will fetch premium price are known and well defined. Also, some will lose value. The advancement in solar technology has made it possible to produce electricity cheaper than fossil fuels, so those will not command any value in the VCM unless produced in an LDC. Politics is another aspect to watch. The impact of Trump administration's decision to withdraw from Paris Agreement will become known in coming months. Whether there will be other Western countries or, more importantly, international businesses which will follow suit. Another important trend to watch is impact of climate change in trade regulation. CBAM, or Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, to be enforced by EU from 1st January 2026 is an example. If an exporter to EU has produced the product through a process with higher emissions than it is being produced in EU, the exporter will be subject to a carbon penalty for an equivalent exceeding the emissions. The world is a complex place, and the carbon markets, informed by science, driven by global commitment for sustainable development, and at the same time resisted by protectionist forces and affected by the politics of North and South, are even more complex. We will have to develop capacities to claim our fair share in this game. With this, I close my remarks. Huge thanks to Chair Karandas for finding time. His presence is always reassuring. Secretary Climate Change for joining us, and Joe, who is a Karandas friend. To my team, Ali Akbar, Hassan Saeed, and Ramsha, for working with Maha to complete this report, and respected panel members whose presence would make the whole webinar star-studded. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vikas, for your valuable insights. Now I would like to welcome Mr. Salim Raza, who is Chairperson Karandas. Mr. Salim has over 40 years of experience in the banking and financial sector. He has also held the position of the Governor of State Bank of Pakistan, and his business experience covers both credit and corporate finance, real estate, and global asset management. He has also been the CEO of the Pakistan Business Council. And with that, I'll hand over the mic to Mr. Salim Raza for his valuable insights into this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hassan Saeed. And Secretary, Ministry of Climate Change, Ms. Aisha Humera, Development Director, FCDO, Ms. Jo Moya, distinguished panelists and experts and honorable guests. This event is the outcome of persistent effort by Karnaz's Research, Marketing and Communication wing that has organized a lot of research into this very important area. And through this webinar, it has brought together experts in policy making, technology, and financing to identify issues and discuss solutions in order that Pakistan can develop a framework that sustainably generates certifiable carbon credits. Now, Pakistan has a framework of public sector entities with responsibility for different aspects of climate change at the federal level and the provincial level. And several relevant policies have been drawn up and good research has been done. The state banks produced a taxonomy report with help from the World Bank and the FCDO that examines our sectors and rates all our industries in a sort of traffic light, not just all our industries, but processes within industries that are rated, in the traffic light green, amber, red framework, with red being what the more carbon emitting activities are, what the issues are, and how some of those can be addressed. Now, the task is how best can we create processes that mobilize the private sector and local communities into this framework of knowledge and policies so that we can build a steady momentum and select projects out of the alternatives that we have and learn how to get them processed so that they can then achieve qualification for carbon credits. Now, Pakistan is a very minor player in global emissions, only 1%, I think, with 31st in the world. Per capita emissions, we're 156th in the world. So, someone's view can be that we have so many other pressing development priorities. And wouldn't it be more relevant for us to, allocate whatever funds we have and we can get to development and then come back to dealing with climate change later? And with time, technology just gets cheaper, quicker, faster, more efficient. So start later, we'll have to spend less. But this view actually is quite spurious. Although may extreme weather events may mostly have global causes, but they only worsen environmental degradation that we already face. For example, affecting our air and our water. That, besides economic damage, cause long-term health problems in adults and also contribute to stunting in children. These issues cannot be left to fester, such as temperature inversion that traps cold air near the ground in the winter months, uh, aggravates smog from burning crop stubble, and prolongs more intensive um, smog. Water contamination, untreated sewage, industrial waste, and agricultural runoff is made considerably worse by floods that break open the channels and spread the contamination, pollution over a much wider area. For example, a University of York study done in 1922 says that the Ravi is the most polluted river in the world. Now, in areas such as this, we have to work at adaptation to the impact of climate change through actions that contain and reduce vulnerability. At the same time, we must galvanize the capacity to mitigate our own carbon emissions through replacing fossil fuels. And we are very well positioned. The World Bank estimate for how much solar could achieve for Pakistan on 0.07% of our land, we could generate enough electricity through solar for the entire requirement of the country. Wind has high potential in southern Pakistan, hydro in the north. So it makes sense for us to then, make it an urgent priority to mobilize both processes, those that seek adaptation and those that seek mitigation or decarbonization, as the World Bank terms it. Now, the panel of experts at the Baku conference in November last year at the COP estimated that by 2030, in order to achieve a 50% reduction in emissions by 2030, uh, the world would have to spend in that year, 2030, $6.5 trillion. So we've got to grow from wherever we are now to $6.5 trillion a year by 2030. This is quite a sum. It's 5% of global GDP. But as the panel of experts points out, the cost of delay will not only increase the cost, it will increase the risk of a sharp fall off in global GDP. And the estimate is that by if we don't do what we have to do, by 2050, global GDP could be 20% lower than it is now. So if in the 6.5 trillion that they see as necessary expenditure, uh, 2.6 trillion they think the developed world will have to spend, 1.5 China, which is by itself the largest emitter, as you know, and 2.4 trillion will have to be spent in emerging markets per annum. Now, the present amount in emerging markets is about 500 billion. So that's a very steep rise, in the next 5 years. Where is it going to come from? So they've made an estimate of where potential sources of financing uh, will come into play. And the I won't go into detail, but what I wish to point out is that they envisage the amount of private sector contribution rising by a factor of 10 to 12 times. So in this 2.4 trillion, 1.4 of which will be domestic, 1 trillion will be external finance. In this total, the amount by which the private sector contribution has to increase is on an average about 12. Now, fortunately, the private sector globally is already poised really towards uh, being committed to climate change. Um, there are several reasons for this. New and more efficient, cheaper technology, yes, fortunately, has become not just an expectation, but is actually happening. Many countries in a good part of the world, the private sector is already working under a system requiring compliance with emission ceilings set for different sectors. And along with this goes the cap and trade system or the emission trading system. Now, the countries that are under such regimes are considerable. All of the EU, Japan, China, Canada, New Zealand, and in America, I don't know what will happen now, but already California and 11 northeastern US states have emission ceilings and are developing trading systems. Also, the private sector is coming through, or getting involved with the subject in a very serious way in many parts of the world and everywhere. And this includes our part of the world. ESG, or environmental social government goals, have become a common commitment and are widely applied by major private companies everywhere. E is the environmental part, and that's what's received the most focus. And this mainly has to do with dealing with carbon emissions. So by 2027, I believe European companies will also be liable to pay duty on imports from countries that have uh, high carbon generating processes in their final product. And this is making our exporters to Europe and exporters elsewhere really delve into their own processes and the processes of their supply chains to change things and work with more renewable, also things like reusing, recycling, the huge amount of plastic used in packaging, etc. Now, at the same time, there are uh, global funds that provide funds for climate change. For Pakistan, we must emphasize, we must try and get our large banks to be accredited with UN bodies such as the Green Climate Fund to qualify to draw from the fund. At the present, we only have two banks accredited, KSB, I think, and NRSP. Now, in terms of Pakistan's own commitments at Baku, we have said we will reach a 50% reduction by 2030. 15% of that will be through our own resources, nationally determined goals, and 35 will need to be externally financed, 35%. So the area we're going to work on is renewable energy up to 60% from 32% now. 30% of all vehicles will be electric vehicles. No new coal projects. We're going to soon ban imported cotton. There's a lot of work to be done on the Indus Basin flood risk management and on enhancing water discharge, i.e., preserving and enhancing surface and underground water. The continuation of nature-based solutions, mangroves, trees and forests. Actually, the Sindh government has already managed to get about $50 million in carbon credits for the work is done on mangroves. And there's a lot more work ahead and opportunity ahead of them. And then we also expect to enhance our protected area, which is our green areas, from 12 to 15%. So the 35% of the target that we financed by externally, we expect about $110 billion spread across solar, wind, hydro, replacing coal, transport, etc. The World Bank estimates we need 348 billion to be spent between now and 2030. So you take out the 110 here, there's still over $200 billion that we have to raise on our own and through other external resources. Uh, there are already funds committed by the World Bank. The IMF is looking at $1 billion for assuming we can implement carbon pricing. This is charging for carbon. And the World Bank's estimate is that if we repurpose our present subsidies given to energy, water, and agriculture and introduce carbon pricing along with emission trading systems, we could raise another $10 billion locally from our own resources. And of course, we can do a lot in public private participation, the government working with the private sector via green bonds, and we can explore many bilateral possibilities. But it's critical that we learn how to access and use voluntary carbon markets. Now, where do we start? And this is what we look forward to hearing from experts today. I mean, the taxonomy prepared by the State Bank can be a starting point, but then we've got to go much further, and we have to have our private sector made familiar with, and our banks made familiar with validation and verification techniques. At present there are two major companies in the world that do this, but it's necessary to have this validation verification if we're going to be able to sell carbon credits. So there's Vera and Gold Standard, and I see someone from Gold Standard is a gentleman from Gold Standard is available is in our group today, and we would look forward to hearing from him. Now, how big is the compulsory carbon market, as Mr. Waqas had pointed out, is big. It's about $800 billion. But much of that compulsory compliance carbon market is used by major companies in the West. The voluntary carbon market is available, open to anybody. It's unregulated. The compliance market is regulated, and therefore it has the potential to grow very fast, the voluntary market. Now, the voluntary market had reached about $2.5 billion of credits sold in 2022, but fell sharply to 750 in 2023 because a lot of greenwashing incidents turned up. And greenwashing is where the promised credits do not actually transpire. That whole process has been reviewed and standards have been toughened. And now that we're going to use Article 6.4 of the UNFCCC rules, Article 6.4, which will define the standards necessary before we can apply for validation, verification, and monitoring benchmarks. Um, the likelihood is that the voluntary credit market will be on much surer footings. And in fact, 2024 saw a recovery from 750 to about double to about 1.4 billion. But the expectation, I mention it because the expectation is huge. Estimates range for 2030, estimates range the size of this market range from $10 billion to $250 billion, and that's by Barclays Bank. So we'll see how it develops, but it's something we have to be able to be engaged with. Many developing countries have set up or are setting up domestic emission trading systems. China, of course, has this. India, Indonesia, Thailand, Malaya, Vietnam should have it in the course of this year. There is also an ASEAN uh, regional trading market emerging, and these present a great, a variety of opportunities for us. But again, a UN emphasis in terms of how we design policies is that climate policies must prioritize equitable access to the benefits of mitigation, so that national climate goals do not come at the cost of human development. In fact, Supreme Court has declared benefit and access to from carbon credits a basic human right. Everyone's entitled to it. Now, um, Waqas mentioned examples of where emerging markets are already generating credits. Ghana has done it in mainly in rice with Switzerland. Switzerland is the buyer, Ghana is the seller. Ghana has generated the credits from changing their rice planting practices, where we suffer as well because this flood irrigation for planting rice generates a lot of methane, and you have to change that with alternate uh, find an alternate system, which Ghana has done. We can do. India has cooking stoves where there was a problem, which is sorted out now, but they also have a lot of biomass conversion, biomass landfills. So landfills to not just smother the emission, but to in fact use the gas, generate gas to be used for industrial or commercial purposes. Vietnam, again, a lot of use of landfills to generate usable gas and prevent greenhouse gases. So, how much can Pakistan achieve? Uh, what will we achieve? It's a challenging scenario, but it's replete with possibilities given where we stand, given our natural and human attributes, and it's delightful to attend this event today, and I look forward to hearing from all the participants. And I genuinely congratulate Karandas for managing to assemble, such a star cast of policymakers and specialists um, here today. With that, thank you very much, and I pass it back to you, Mr. Hassan Saeed.
Thank you, Salim Saab, for that wonderful discussion that we just had. And now I would like to request Ms. Maha to join us, who is one of the key and leading authors for the report that we're launching today. And she'll be presenting a brief presentation on the study findings and followed by hopefully a brief Q&A. And something about Maha is that she's the CEO of Zero Point Partners, an advisory and consulting firm focused on enabling the transition to a sustainable economy. She has 15 plus years of experience in environmental management, in social and environmental and social and governance strategy and climate finance. Over to you, Maha, and anybody, to all the participants. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A below. We'll try and answer them after the presentation ends and before the panel begins. And secondly, I know a lot of people have asked about the recording itself. It will be available after tomorrow on our YouTube and Facebook pages. And over to you, Maha. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Hassan. I hope everyone can hear me. So, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. It's great to see that there's so many, participants attending today's webinar. So today I'll just be sharing some of the key findings from the carbon credits trading study. The report will be available online on the Karanda's website after this webinar. So briefly, we'll cover the overview of the key points, our main findings and recommendations. So the speakers who came before me have already set the stage for, the difference between voluntary and compliance markets, and we've also briefly touched upon Articles 6.2 and 6.4. So I won't, cover them in too much detail, and we'll focus more on kind of our recommendations for policymakers and the private sector. So, as was already mentioned, COP29, the Conference of Parties in Baku last year, laid the groundwork for a robust and trustworthy market with an agreement to operationalize Article 6 of the Paris Agreement and enhance private sector engagement and market integrity. So essentially, the idea is to make carbon credits more reliable, to increase their credibility and make the entire process more transparent and more credible. A centralized Paris Agreement crediting mechanism was greenlit to begin operations. This is essentially the body that will oversee Article 6.4, which is the UNFCCC governed carbon market. The launch is expected mid of this year, so mid-2025, and credits can be issued and transacted starting in 2026. Article 6.2 is already operational, and as the earlier speakers mentioned, we've already seen trades happen, bilaterally between countries like Ghana and Switzerland, and Ghana and Singapore. Already these countries are bilaterally trading carbon credits on a bilateral basis. Two sets of standards were also finalized for Article 6.4 at COP29, and these essentially govern the requirements for removing greenhouse gases, developing and assessing carbon projects. Just quickly to recap, compliance carbon market exists in jurisdictions with cap and trade systems. The governing body or the government essentially determines the emissions cap, which is the amount that industries within that jurisdiction can emit in a certain year. The cap is decreased every year to ensure that the governing body or the jurisdiction is able to meet its carbon target, And the largest kind of existing or the oldest carbon market based on the compliance model exists in the European Union, the EU ETS. The voluntary carbon market exists in parallel, and it's unregulated. Businesses and individuals can buy credits of their own accord to offset their own carbon emissions. Primarily, this is for organizations that want to offset emissions to meet climate targets, improve their brand image as being green. We might have seen some products that are labeled as net zero or climate friendly, improve their ESG score. So sustainability scoring for companies is increasingly in demand. And all of these organizations and individuals can purchase carbon credits from the voluntary carbon market. What we're expecting to see in the next, few years is a convergence of the two, potentially with Article 6.4 and Article 6.2 gaining more prominence. But this is, again, it's evolving as we speak. So possibly at COP30, there might be further developments. Briefly, I wanted to explain Article 6.2, the mechanism for trade. So this allows for a decentralized approach where countries can enter into bilateral or multilateral agreements to trade carbon credits, also known as emission reduction units. Each carbon credit or emissions reduction unit represents 1 ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. These are known as international mitigation outcomes, or ITMOs. So, for example, a host country, let's take the example of Pakistan, has already met its NDC commitments to the UNFCCC, and in excess of that, it's able to reduce further emissions. So, let's say they have in excess 100 tons of CO2 equivalent. So, Pakistan could sell these credits to a buying country which is not able to meet its NDC targets, and that country can purchase emissions reduction units directly from the host country and add it to their national GHG emissions inventory. Both countries need to track and account for this trade within their NDCs and their national GHG emissions inventories to ensure that there is no double counting. So the host country, for example, cannot count these emissions which are being traded towards its own NDCs, and only one entity can actually use them to offset their carbon footprint. So Article 6.2 has been operational for a couple of years. It promotes direct cooperation between countries, enabling them to set their own terms without necessarily central oversight from the UNFCCC. But the emissions reductions or the trade has to be registered in both the countries' national GHG emissions inventory. Article 6.4 establishes a centralized mechanism that essentially creates a global carbon market overseen by the UNFCCC's Article 6.4 supervisory body. This is similar to the Clean Development Mechanism, which was previously the global carbon market that was also overseen by the UNFCCC. So whereas Article 6.2 focuses on government-to-government agreements, Article 6.4 allows for both public and private entities to participate in project development and trade. The credits have a slightly different name. They're known as Article 6.4 emissions reduction units. These have to be approved by both the host country where the project will be implemented, as well as the UNFCCC supervisory body before any credits can be issued. So it's a slightly more bureaucratic process. Article 6.2 is relatively easier, I would say, to implement, but Article 6.4 might have maybe even further credibility and might fetch a higher price. So Article 6 units can be authorized, and the ones that are authorized by the UNFCCC, these can be used towards another country's NDCs, the nationally determined contributions. So these are just commitments from every country to the UNFCCC to reduce emissions by a certain date. They can be used towards other international mitigation purposes like the carbon trading scheme for the aviation industry, also known as CORSIA, as well as other purposes like voluntary claims. Article 6 units that are not authorized, these can be used domestically, as well as for other purposes like voluntary claims. So earlier in November of 2024, the government of Pakistan issued Pakistan's first carbon markets framework to formally operationalize carbon markets. Even prior to this, there were a few carbon credit trading projects in operations in the country, but these were largely ungoverned. So now we have a proper structure to govern the trade and sale of carbon credits. The Ministry of Climate Change is the national authority. It is authorized to authorize ITMOs, the internationally traded mitigation outcomes, define the processes and enact legislation to regulate Article 6. The Pakistan's policy guidelines for trading inform the use of finance raised through the sale of carbon offsets. So of course, a certain percentage will go to the government, and these are to be pooled in a climate change fund. And the use of those funds will be governed under this policy. It also provides guiding principles to define which mitigation outcomes are eligible to be authorized and transferred to other countries. Finally, the ministry has also provided or is in the process of making available infrastructure and accounting tools to track, monitor, and register internationally traded mitigation outcomes leaving and entering the host country. So again, this is the corresponding adjustment mechanism to ensure that carbon credits are not double counted in any transaction. Quickly, just to summarize the roles of different stakeholders, the Ministry of Climate Change is Pakistan's nationally designated authority for climate finance, including, of course, carbon credits, but also the Green Climate Fund, other international climate finance opportunities. The ministry coordinates with other stakeholders on carbon markets to build Pakistan's capacity, and they've been organizing several workshops, for private sector participants and provincial stakeholders as well to develop carbon markets capacity in Pakistan. In parallel, the Global Change Impact Studies Center, the GCISC, is sort of the technical and scientific body that is supporting the development of carbon markets. So they developed Pakistan's first NDCs in 2021 and are currently in the process of revising these nationally determined contributions or targets to the UNFCCC. So as Salim Saab mentioned, In the previous NDCs that was submitted in 2021, Pakistan committed to a 15% reduction in emissions against a 2018 baseline by 2030, as well as 35% that would be conditional on international climate finance. These, of course, might change in the next iteration, which is due sometime this year. The GCISC also conducts climate change research studies and maintains the National GHG Emissions Inventory. So as I mentioned, the last iteration of the National Emissions Inventory was in 2018. And of course, the next iteration is the basis for the revised NDCs. They also lead national decarbonization research and development efforts and support policy analysis and information dissemination. Next, we have our provincial government stakeholders. So almost all of the provinces now have their own provincial planning and development departments and dedicated climate finance units that are actively working on climate finance opportunities within their own ambit. The provincial planning and development departments they're developing capacity to establish carbon offset projects through these climate finance units, facilitating the private sector for carbon offset project development by issuing licenses and granting the necessary approvals. Eventually, they will be the ones responsible for ensuring compliance with regulatory requirements and engaging with the local community to ensure that projects are delivering community co-benefits. So one of the key stipulations of a good carbon credit project or carbon offset project is to ensure that at the bare minimum, projects do no significant harm and don't make the local communities worse off than they were before. The high quality carbon credits that fetch higher prices are the ones that actually make the community better off in terms of generating jobs or providing better facilities, protecting biodiversity. So for example, if you're protecting forests, then it also provides a habitat for the local flora and fauna to flourish. Next, we have our private sector stakeholders. So why would they want to invest in carbon markets? So there are two types of private stakeholders who are interested in carbon markets. So first, of course, are organizations that want to design and develop carbon offset projects. So these are companies that are hoping to make profits by investing in some of these projects. And then, of course, there are companies that want to offset their carbon footprint by purchasing offsets from the local market. I think one of the speakers mentioned the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, so the CBAM. So for example, Pakistani export companies are trading in a product that has a high emissions footprint. So they might be able to offset their own emissions footprint by purchasing offsets from the local market, which would be cheaper for them than purchasing offsets from the international market. Last year, the SECP, the Securities and Exchange Commission of Pakistan, also now requires listed companies to start tracking their Scope 1 and Scope 2 greenhouse gas emissions. And eventually, of course, companies are required to decarbonize their supply chains. So, of course, offsets might be one way to do that, particularly for the emissions-intensive sectors like power generation, steel production, cement, fertilizer, etc. So private sector companies can, come up with project concept notes and invest in pilot projects to assess the viability of various carbon offset methodologies that are relevant to their own business value chains. They might support in conducting feasibility studies. They might invest in developing, feasible carbon offset projects, as well as leverage business platforms to highlight aggregated carbon offset project opportunities. And this is where we're looking at, let's say, a paradigm shift potential if enough projects in a certain area are able to scale. We also have our development sector partners who've been part of this exercise. So this includes the UN bodies like the United Nations Environment Programme, the Global Green Growth Institute. They are currently providing technical assistance for carbon markets as part of their SPAR 6C program, alongside other partners. The World Bank, of course, supported the Ministry of Climate Change in developing an MRV system. So this is a monitoring, reporting, and verification system to streamline data collection, processing, and maintain quality control. The GIZ and some other development partners are also supporting the country in executing the Strengthening Adaptation and Resilience Program. The GIZ is also currently exploring the feasibility of developing a national emissions trading system, and this might exist in parallel to the international sort of carbon market. They're also funding a French company called Cytipa to assist with the development of the MRB web platform, the one that World Bank is also working on. So based on just some research that we did, and we spoke to several different stakeholders, both local and international. So we've identified a few carbon credit project methodologies which are viable for Pakistan, at least based on their viability in other similar countries with similar kind of economic and socioeconomic conditions to those of Pakistan. So this is Pakistan's national greenhouse gas inventory. The recent one is as recent as of 2018. And as I mentioned, the government is currently working on, the GCISC is working on updating this. So as we can see from here, in 2018, Pakistan was emitting around 500 million tons of CO2 equivalent of greenhouse gases. The energy and agriculture sectors together account for more than 90% of Pakistan's emissions, right? So as we can see, these are the two most emissions intensive sectors. Waste and industrial processes and product use are significantly smaller. So just in my opinion, the greatest potential actually in making a significant impact lies in the agricultural, forestry and land use, as well as the energy sectors. Globally as well, we're seeing a shift from renewable energy projects towards other sectors for the registration of new carbon offset projects in the VCM. This is largely because, as was mentioned by Waqas in the very beginning, renewable energy technologies have now become so cheap and so cost competitive compared to traditional fossil fuel energy sources that they no longer meet the additionality criteria for robust carbon credit projects, which is why that transition has happened organically in Pakistan, and we've seen that in the last couple of years, Pakistan has imported almost 15 gigawatts of solar capacity into the country. So that sort of shift from traditional fossil fuel sources towards renewables is happening organically in the country, and we don't require carbon credits to justify that transition any longer. So ideally, carbon offsets should be focused on technologies that are new, that are innovative, that are being deployed for the first time, or even new sectors. So as we can see just from global trends, there's increased interest in household and community devices. Largely, this means cook stoves that are more efficient, that don't burn inefficient fuels. There's also been increased interest in some of the other sectors like forestry and land use, and then some have remained more or less constant. So if you go through the report, we've identified projects, categorized them in terms of short, medium, and long term. So short-term potential projects are the ones that are relatively easy to deploy and scale, and they're generally quick to issue carbon credits as well. So the entire project cycle is between 5 to 7 years or less. So in the energy sector, of course, like I said, distribution of cook stoves to indigenous communities. This essentially requires distributing cook stoves. So first of all, there would be a baseline to see what the fractional renewable fraction of non-renewable biomass. So this is just a technical term, like how much wood is being cut down by these communities for traditional fuel wood for cooking, and what is the emissions differential by providing them with efficient cook stoves. The project can be deployed within a couple of years, and after a verification from one of the international carbon credit registries, the project can be set up in a relatively short time. Similarly, projects like community-based micro-hydro mini-grids in KPK, this is a project within Pakistan. These, again, are relatively easy to deploy and scale up, and the carbon credits can be issued in a relatively short space of time. So again, I think in the report, we've classified these as projects that can be set up and can issue credits within 5 years of project conception. Then we have medium-term potential projects, and these are projects that have that take slightly longer to set up, slightly longer to verify their emissions reduction potential. They might require a larger investment as well. So these could be projects in the transport sector. Right now, even in Pakistan, there's a huge upsurge in interest in EVs. So one of the projects we looked at was the grouped commercial vehicle EV project in India. And essentially, by replacing fossil fuel vehicles with EVs, this company has managed to reduce GHG emissions per distance driven. So This is one project that could relatively be deployed quickly. Then India has a dairy biogas program. This is in the waste sector, and this is a social enterprise that empowers farmers with biodigesters that convert waste to energy and fertilizer, promoting sustainable agriculture. So as you can see, there are multiple co-benefits. Again, this project could be relatively easily deployed in Pakistan because we have similar kind of socioeconomic conditions, and agriculture is one of the large polluting sectors for the country. We've also included a few others. Currently, I believe the government of Punjab is working on a on a landfill gas project. And essentially what they do is collect and combust landfill gas. And this project helps mitigate the environmental impact of the landfills. So earlier today, actually, I was looking online, and you can actually see how much methane is being emitted by just landfills across Pakistan in different parts of the country. And it's easy to zone in using Google Maps as well. In the forestry sector, agroforestry is taking off. And this essentially means, planting trees alongside traditional crops. So this helps improve soil health and sequester more carbon in the soil. Long-term projects, so blue carbon, we've seen quite a successful one in Pakistan as well. These are long-term projects because trees, of course, take time to grow. So if you plant a sapling today, it will be at least 3 years before it reaches a certain maturity. And it's very important to monitor the growth of the tree in the first 3 to 5 years before it can kind of, become more independent. And the sequestration actually starts happening in year 7 or year 10, depends on the species. And we've done this for neem trees also for one of our clients in Pakistan. So these are long-term projects, but the good thing is that these can be renewed indefinitely, as in for the lifetime of the trees, right? Which typically live for between 50 to 100 years, some species even longer. So these projects are viable because, if it's successful for the first 20 years, it can then be renewed for another 20 years. And of course, the credits are high quality because they have a lot of environmental co-benefits. For example, habitat restoration, livelihoods for the communities and things like that. Okay. So there are substantial opportunities for Pakistan. We have been engaged in some sort of carbon or climate finance for the last 10 plus years. In the earlier CDM, Clean Development Mechanism phase as well, Pakistan private sector companies in particular were able to develop strong institutional knowledge and capacity, particularly for nature-based projects, right? The forests of KPK and all. So there's a lot of institutional capacity right now sitting within our forest departments. Sindh and KPK already participate in carbon markets to an extent and have significant potential to scale these up. There are significant opportunities also in the agriculture, energy, and industrial carbon offset project side. And of course, this is a priority area for international development organizations. There is a lot of climate finance available, even to conduct feasibility studies or test the viability of certain project concepts. So definitely it's a space that is seeing a lot of interest. Briefly, I wanted to talk about this example. So the Delta Blue Carbon Project, it's a partnership between a private company called Indus Delta Capital and the government of Sindh to sustainably manage tidal wetlands in the southeast coast of Sindh. Excuse me. So this project covers around 350,000 hectares and has a lifetime of around 60 years. So it can be renewable every 20 years for another 20 years. The project aims to restore and protect basically benthic invertebrates. So these are, that are found in these areas, and will sequester around 142 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. This is the data from their website. It might have increased even further to date. This is just a visual of where these mangrove restoration projects have taken place. So this project was done in 2 phases. Phase 1, as you can see, it's on the left-hand side in green, and phase 2 is on the right-hand side. This is ongoing. And of course, the monitoring and evaluation and verification is done, of course, by international partners so far. But ideally, this capacity should exist in Pakistan as well in the next few months. There remain some technical and regulatory gaps in Pakistan. So it's currently difficult to onboard international technical experts due to some policies of the State Bank, and we don't have any local verification and validation bodies to support carbon offset project registration. So I think these gaps will soon be filled. And finally, of course, macroeconomic stability is crucial for the success of carbon markets. We've seen a lot of variability, fluctuations in the last 5 years as well. So it's important that we maintain macroeconomic stability to the extent possible to ensure that the investments made today don't, of course, suffer down the line. Finally, the recommendations, they're there in the report as well, and I encourage you all to read it. So in Pakistan, these are just some top lines from the carbon markets policy. The project, any carbon market project should be registered on the National Core Registry. 5% of these credits will be deducted at source to contribute to Pakistan's own NDC commitments. Once the carbon credits are sold, a corresponding adjustments fee must be paid to Pakistan's federal and provincial government. This is 12% of net carbon credit revenues, and this is to be divided equally between the host province, and the remaining 6% would be pooled in the Pakistan Climate Change Fund. And then 1% is just kind of a fees to the federal government. So just in terms of our recommendations, we recommend that the government actively seek bilateral collaborations with countries aiming to meet NDC targets. As Waqar Saab mentioned earlier, this is a competitive market. So of course, it's important that we get a head start on this until the Paris Agreement crediting mechanism, Article 6.4, is fully operational. We should also encourage local private sector entities to act as project developers and facilitate project development. Basically, like to do this quickly. Finally, to mitigate potential financial risk, we can introduce forward contract agreements for carbon credit projects to reduce risk associated with the fluctuating carbon pricing. But as Waqar Saab mentioned earlier as well, the carbon credit prices might increase. So again, it's important to maintain a balance between long-term lock-in to long-term contracts and maintaining short-term flexibility as well. Countries can also create carbon credit buffer pools. So sometimes it might happen that a certain project is found to be not viable, or there's a forest fire, for example, and that particular area of land, the credits go to waste. So the buffer pool essentially provides some sort of climate insurance or a carbon credit insurance for the buyers to reduce their risk. Article 6 sales can also be limited to activities from a country's conditional NDC target. So that means the unconditional targets might be met through what are known as low-hanging fruit activities. And the conditional NDC targets can be met through activities that are more expensive or that are more difficult to implement. And finally, AI can now be used to increase the reliability of MRV tools. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. And in case of any questions, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you, Maha, for such a brilliant presentation, very crisp and very lucid. We have 5 minutes for questions. We already have some of them lined up. So I'll begin the first one. We have one by SN Anis. And his question is that new NDC targets are being established by Pakistan. When would those be available? Any idea?
Yes, so this was mentioned by SN Kamran. I think he's also one of the participants. So we're expecting this should be available by around July, but some countries like the UK and the UAE have already submitted targets.
Thank you so much. So for the next question, we have one by Dr. Javeria. She said, Ms. Maha, can you elaborate any potential host project example for ITMOs?
Yes, so these are for international trading. I mean, there are a lot of methodologies that can be deployed, locally. We can take an example of the alternate wetting and drying project for low methane rice. So this, it's beneficial in several ways. The farmers would benefit because they're conserving water. Essentially, you're doing resource optimization. So that could be one example. And I believe there is a pilot project being supported by the Asian Development Bank for this. So this is just one example off the top of my head. There could be others, of course. There's a lot of potential. Yeah.
Okay. So next question is by Hamza Farooq. He says, greetings, my name is Hamza, and I'm pursuing my undergrad degree in fintech. And his question is to promote ESG and carbon-friendly financing. can we implement a system where financial institutions provide lending based on carbon credit points? And additionally, does a market for such a model currently exist in Pakistan?
For national institutions. Okay, so carbon credit points, as in the potential to generate carbon credits, or I mean, the companies that are serious about offsetting, or
Yes,
they're purchasing
yes,
carbon
yeah,
credits. It could be
yeah.
both. I think this would definitely count towards a companies like decarbonization goals, right? So the SECP has recently launched the Sustain dashboard, where they actually hope to encourage companies to list, or to share their decarbonization targets in the next few years. And investors could actually compare like two companies in the same industry or sector. For example, let's say if there are two cement companies and one is significantly working harder to decarbonize its supply chain versus another. So this would be automatically more attractive for investment from particularly for green finance or investment from banks or financial institutions. In fact, the State Bank has already given guidelines to to the companies to meet certain carbon reduction targets through the green banking guidelines of 2017, as well as the environmental and social risk management guidelines that were issued in 2022. And they've recently launched the green taxonomy, which actively incentivizes investment in green activities. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. So we have time for just two more questions. Next is by someone named Shadab. He's asked, who will establish the actual carbon credits market under the carbon market framework in Pakistan?
So the market it's virtual. It's not like a physical marketplace where you purchase and sell. There's a carbon exchange. No, I think it's a valid question. So there are currently two carbon exchanges. The biggest one is in Singapore. It's called Expansive, I believe, and there are some in other countries as well. So I mean, it's a virtual platform. It's a digital platform. Where companies can list or auction off their carbon credits. But at the same time, if we do establish a local emissions trading scheme, this would probably be managed by the Ministry of Climate Change.
Perfect. So we have one final question, and this is by Ali Hamza. His question is what are the key carbon credit opportunities available in housing/urban development sector under public and private partnership in Pakistan to offset carbon emissions/footprint reduction?
Yes. So I don't remember the name of the methodology off the top of my head, but building efficiency is one area which is actively sort of an area of further, I think, interest. So if we can prove that a certain building has is generating XYZ emissions in a certain year, and then we do a building retrofit, which substantially reduces emissions, and they have a cost. So this cost could be offset through carbon credits. I don't remember the exact methodology off the top of my head, but definitely there is a potential to prove that there's an emissions differential here. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much, Maha. I think that is all that we have for you. We also have other questions which are very interesting, but unfortunately, due to time constraints, we can't answer all of them. But I would like to say that for people who still want to have the questions answered, please email them to me at hasan.said@karandas.com.pk, and I'll bother Maha, and I'll get her to answer them for you, and I'll email them back to you. But either way, thank you so much, Maha. Thank you so much for the presentation and for taking out the time to answer them. Moving on, now I would like to ask Naveed Guraya Saab to join us as the moderator. He'll be moderating our first panel titled Operationalizing the Carbon Credits Market in Pakistan. Mr. Guraya is the Chief Investment Officer at Karandas. He has over 30 years of global experience leading investment banking and asset management business in various global banks in the MENA region, North America, and Pakistan. He has been the chief investment officer for Karandas for quite a while now. And before joining Karandas, he was leading a strategic advisory firm, White Oak Advisors, based out of New York. And he holds an MBA from IBA Karachi. And our panelists for today include Hassan Khawir, who's a management international development consultant, who is also a public policy commentator and a researcher. He has over 20 plus years of experience in public, private, and development sectors, and he has worked in areas of institutional reforms, economic growth, and climate change. Presently, he is the team leader for the FCDO-funded Sustainable Energy and Economic Development Project. Next up, we have Fatma Khalid, who is a climate change specialist with work experience spanning across the different regions of Pakistan. She has worked extensively in the province of Sindh on environmental management, improvement and compliance projects with Agro Corporation, and in Punjab and KP and Islamabad, advising on environmental governance and community-based climate change adaptation. She currently works as a climate change advisor with FCDO. Also, we have Ibrahim Khan, who has over 30 years of experience in numerous forestry conservation and climate change projects with organizations like WWF Pakistan, UNDP, and the Ministry of Climate Change. His expertise also includes MRIV systems, GHG inventories, and major initiatives such as the Green Pakistan program and the Billion Tree Tsunami Afforestation project. And he has also authored key reports and publications on forest management, ecological assessments, and climate resilience in Pakistan. Lastly, we have Zulfikar Yunus Saab with us. I've been told that he'll be joining us momentarily. He's facing some technical difficulties at his end, but I'll still give you his introduction. He is an accomplished professional with over 30 years of experience in government, public finance, and diplomatic roles. He's currently serving as Additional Finance Secretary and Special Assistant to the Finance Minister of Pakistan. He has contributed significantly to federal budgets, public sector development programs, and economic policy initiatives. And with this, I will hand it over to Naveed. Naveed, if you can take it from here, and I'll see what's the issue that Fikar Sahib is facing, and hopefully that he joins us for this session.
Thank you, Hassan, and good afternoon, everyone. Before we begin into the session, I just wanted to say that Maha in the previous session has very clearly articulated and referred to certain projects that can be implemented in Pakistan, giving regional examples and the recommendations that she's shared as well. Now, from Karandaz's perspective where I work, it's encouraging to see that there is already a pipeline like that. And this study and hopefully our discussion today will be very useful and relevant from that perspective. So now moving to the implementation side of this forum's discussion. In this panel, we'll talk about operationalizing the carbon credit markets in Pakistan. And that to us is the next imperative. The framework is there, and now the operationalization begins. My name is Naveed Gurai, as Hassan mentioned, Chief Investment Officer Karandaz, which is Karandaz, as you know, is the largest impact fund in Pakistan, where we are fortunate to manage, among others, a climate finance portfolio and have a dedicated green financing team. And that gives us a little bit of perspective as well and how happy we are to see these policies and this study in place. So to the audience, ladies and gentlemen, developing a robust credits market, carbon credit market is a climate imperative, largely because it is a vital bridge that links economically viable projects with the global and domestic investment capital. Now, this is a very short term or a very compressed statement. There's a long things that happen between the two, but we have to start at this stage. Now, as Pakistan advances towards its NDC targets, establishing a transparent and well-regulated carbon market policy has been essential to ensuring credibility, investor confidence, and the long-term sustainability of such a marketplace. Today's panel brings together from policy and regulation, international development financing, and nature-based solutions experts. We have today with us Mr. Zulfikar, who is, I think, not joined us yet, Mr. Hassan Khawa, who is the team lead of SEED program, Ms. Fatma Khalid, who is the climate advisor at FCDO, and Mr. Ibrahim Khan, who is the director of forests at WWF Pakistan. Fellow panelists, thank you and welcome for joining us today. Your collective expertise today will undoubtedly provide a comprehensive perspective on the agenda that is on the table right now. Pakistan has indeed made key strides in developing a voluntary credit market, which is marked by the launch of the recent carbon policy guidelines for trading in the markets as announced by the Ministry of Climate Change in COP29. It's important to note that multiple framework elements are already in place now, gradually. at both the policy and regulatory levels. MOCC has played a great role. SECP has green bond guidelines. State Bank of Pakistan has green banking guidelines and related taxonomy. FBR has certain tax benefits and advantages related to it, and among others, each will contribute within the respective framework element to the operation of this particular market. So our focus now is to see how the implementation of this policy will start and ensuring that there is regulatory clarity, institutional readiness, and there is strong stakeholder engagement for a credible trading system. Now, this study by Karan Das that's being launched today is very timely in my view because this panel will share their insights on what is required to operationalize, and it acts as more or less a 101 for most entities, organizations looking to take advantage. I'll jump straight to a question to Mr. Hassan Khawa, who's the team lead for SEED program. Hassan, I'd like to know that when looking at the various number of stakeholders in such an operationalization function, going from policy to actual trading, we have to identify each of those players. And the previous session also, it was identified there is a capacity constraint. There is a need for technical assistance. There is a need to upgrade all of these to ensure that that level of skill is available at each of those levels, developers, consultants, market developers. From your perspective, you've worked on technical assistance and have been implementing the SEED program as well successfully. What, in your perspective, would technical assistance play a role in strengthening of such a market infrastructure? And how can we support this transition through your learnings about implementing such technical assistance programs?
Thank you so much, Naveed Saab, for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to speak here. Before I start, I just wanted to make a small correction. It's Hassan Khawa, but my name is the most often mispronounced, so no problems with that. I want to congratulate Karan Das, Maha, and everyone else who has worked on this report. Because my understanding is that despite the great hoo-ha about climate finance and carbon credits, not everyone is as clear about how these markets work and how they are really structured. And I went through your report this morning, and it's an excellent, very well-structured report with a lot of clarity. It's quite readable, it's brief, but I think it has everything that's relevant. So very useful. And I think that will go a long way in spreading the awareness about how carbon markets work. So my kudos to the whole team. Now, I am also assuming that we have limited time for each participant to respond and for the panel discussion. So I'll just try to consolidate my response just in case I don't get talk again. So before I move forward, let me briefly tell you what the SEED program has been doing. And the way and then I'd come to your question. So SEED program currently is working on the investment readiness and the market readiness for government of KP and trying to mobilize investment in other areas as well as carbon credits and carbon markets. What we are doing is a combination of three things. So we are helping government of KP developing carbon credit inventories, and I'll get to that. We are also trying to build capacity of our counterparts in the government so that they are well versed to look at these markets and to be able to tap into them. And we are also bringing in the tech play wherever we can. So that's what we are trying to do. And the two sectors that we have picked up are forest and energy. Now, if you look at forest, KP holds 40% of Pakistan's forest, but it also constitutes 51% of the forest carbon stock. And interestingly, over the last decade, the forest cover in Pakistan has increased by 6%, and that is largely due to the billion tree afforestation project. So KP has played quite a bit of role there. And we are focusing on the ARR and IFM and AUDD transactions. And what we are doing with technology is we are using high-res satellite imagery. We are trying to make use of AI-powered land use detection models, geospatial modeling, and all of that. So the inventories are not ready, but there are some early findings. And let me give you a bit of a sneak peek into that. So we are estimating that KP has the ARR afforestation potential of about 78,000 hectares, which would have the carbon removal capacity of about 684,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, which comes to about 26 million tons over 40 years. The IFM potential, of course, is much more. It's 2.8 million hectares. And the annual sequestration potential is around 14 million tons. And we have come across a lot of major deforestation drivers that we are taking into account, like agri expansion, illegal logging, and all of those things. And the revenue potential, based on conservative estimate, could be as much as $4 billion over the next 40 years. We are also looking at the energy sector, despite what Maha and your report tells about the energy market's potential, that it's limited now. But we are also looking at the off-grid projects. But right now, at least, even if not for carbon credit, the whole of KP's portfolio, the hydro and solar portfolio, does qualify for carbon credit, not only for carbon credit, but for IREX. And I think that's a major source that can be a very significant source for KP, even for the projects that are there, for which there is no additionality and which cannot qualify for carbon credits. And interestingly, if you really look at the hydro potential, KP has about roughly 25 gigawatt of hydro potential, and they have only tapped 2,600 megawatts. So it's a fraction of what they can do. And I do believe that in cases where they can bring in additionality, they can make use of carbon financing to make that work. And we are trying in our modest way to help them achieve that. Now, coming to your question, Naveed Saab, that when you think about so many stakeholders in a big market, I think it's very important to have your direction set, that what is it that we are trying to achieve. And yes, we are trying to bring in climate finance, as Vikas Saab initially said, that's one thing, and then it's a twofold objective. But I think in order to do that, we really need to tap into the private sector. So I think our north on the compass should be de-risking private investment into carbon offset projects. And if we take that into account, I think everything else would be much clearer. You're absolutely right. It's a very important time in terms of Pakistan's history, because Ministry of Climate Change recently came up with a carbon market policy guidelines. And I think that will go a long way in at least addressing the policy uncertainty bit for the investors, because that has been keeping a lot of investors at bay from investing. So that's very clear. But I do think that after the policy guidelines, there are a lot of things, a lot of work cut out for all the stakeholders, especially the national and the subnational government. The policy does make note of that. It talks about setting up a national registry, then the work on corresponding adjustment, which is just starting. Your report makes a note of the bilateral arrangements that are not really very, very effective in case of Pakistan under Article 6.2. So I think they need to be operationalized. So our work is cut out for us. And I think that is where the governments have to play their part. And that is where the development partners have to play their part. Then when you come to the financial risks and de-risking the financial risk for the investors, I think that's where a lot of development projects, for example, FCDO is coming up with SIFPAC, and Karindaz itself can play a role. Your report does make a mention of forward contracts and carbon credit buffer pools and all those things. I think those are all part of the larger ambition to de-risk the investment, the private investment. So I think the role of Karandas and financial intermediaries would be very, very important in that sense. Then if you look at like sectors like solid waste management, and you look at sectors like forest, essentially the whole the nature-based solution universe, I think the government's role is very important because government actually holds a lot of rights on forest. It's involved in solid waste management. So we need to find ways and mechanisms in which we can plug in private sector where they can do carbon offset projects in partnership with the government. And I think that's a very important bit, and that is for especially important for development partners that are working at the subnational level with governments of KP, Punjab, Sindh, and everywhere, because that's where they can really, really make a difference. Then I think we can talk about your local MRV ecosystem. Again, as I said, your report is very comprehensive. I did make a note of that we don't have local VVBs, and that makes the whole gig very, very expensive. And I think we do need to work on that ecosystem so that they can work effectively and they can make the market work. And then I think the how should I put it? I think we need to work not only on the technical capacity of the subnational government, but also the way they communicate with the private sector, the way they look at this whole carbon market ecosystem. Because right now, when you look at government stakeholders, and I'm not talking about Ministry of Climate Change or people who are working in this domain, but I'm talking about line departments which are working in different sectors that are going to be very, very relevant for these projects. They, of course, live on a different pole altogether. If you come to like a climate finance event, or if you talk to project developers or the standard companies like Vera and Gold Standard and verification bodies, the terminology which they use, the things that they talk about is French, literally to the people who, for example, are working in transport department or elsewhere. And I think we need to bridge that gap. We need to connect the two universes together. So in short, what I believe is that while programs like SEED are doing their bit, it is a very large puzzle to solve. And what really was an eye-opener for me when the CEO initially said that right now, like globally, it's like 0.05% of the whole system that we are tapping into right now. So sky is the limit. And I think we all have to do our bits, all the stakeholders, whether project developers, governments, investors, the MRV companies, and everyone. And we need to do it in a synergistic fashion to really make an impact. And I really hope that with this effort, we'd be able to make use of the growth projections of the carbon credit market that we are talking about. And in the next 10 years, at least, when we are having a session again, we can at least be somewhat proud of what we have done. Thank you.
Indeed, Hassan, thank you so much. De-risking is something that is a role to be played not only by DFIs, but the government also has a role to play there. And this is, as you say, a very large puzzle to solve. Each project and each area will have different stakeholders and different kind of engagement that will need to be done. And your experience with SEED certainly is something that adds to our knowledge today as far as that is concerned. If I can, Zulfikar Sahab, welcome. If I could request you to add by asking a question just for the audience, Mr. Zulfikar Yunus, the Additional Secretary, Ministry of Climate Change. Zulfikar Sahab, to understand how Pakistan is shaping its carbon market, we have to look at the policy landscape which is shaped, taking further shape. Now, the Ministry of Climate Change is leading the country's efforts in the policy and market development front. Now, I'll be grateful if you can walk us through some of the key elements of the new carbon market framework as you see it, and how it aligns with the global and international best practices. And in that context, also perhaps later on you can share how industries are or can ready themselves for it.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me start thanking Waqasul Hassan, for organizing this very useful and important panel discussion. As you already mentioned, we have notified the carbon market policy. Now we are in the process of populating it. And what Hassan just mentioned, we need to develop the whole ecosystem for the carbon markets. And also, what I saw the report, Maha's report is very comprehensive, but we have to go beyond that also. So while we are, in the process of finalizing our, let me just update you where we are now. We have notified the policy, carbon policy. We have a lot of countries in this domain. They don't have the carbon policy yet. So we have that, but now we have to move on, and we have now formed a committee. We have prepared a first draft of our rules under the policy, so which will follow the policy. So the rules are, the first cut has been ready. Now we have some stakeholders. A committee has been formed with the provinces and also climate experts and also civil society. So they are reviewing that draft. So we hope that by next month, we will be able to take it to our cabinet for their approval. So when the rules are approved by cabinet, we will be, start implementing that. At the same time, we have also developed our carbon registry, national registry, and we are in the process of now, there are issues with the testing, its user acceptance testing, and then formal deployment. So the registry would look like, as just Maha also mentioned, that the market is not a physical market, but it's more of a kind of a virtual market. So we have the registry where all the companies who want to, offer their credits, our supplier companies, they can offer, and then the buyers will, from that, could be traded. And the ministry will issue the LOI, and the PDD and other formalities ministry will complete. So we have two markets. One is compliance, the other is voluntary carbon markets. Earlier, our vision was that we will have a kind of a more of a freer, regime for the voluntary carbon market. But then, as you might be knowing, I am also one of the members of, there is a supervisory body for 6.4 mechanism formed by UNFCCC. So I'm one of the 12 global members. So there are 12 members globally. I'm the member from Asia Pacific constituency. So we had this meeting in the Bhutan last week, and there it was debated that, host party, which means in our case, Pakistan, will have a responsibility for even voluntary carbon credits as well, because the integrity of the credit, the value of the credit will largely depend how the credit has been, developed. What are the co-benefit in that credit, and then the other elements which include, how transparent the whole mechanism is, and then how the communities where the credit is being generated are benefited due to that credit. So these are all ingredients which actually brings the strength to your credit, and then accordingly the market value for the credit. So it was, because host country has to certify and has to validate the credit. So it's very important that the host country has. So now we are thinking that we should not have a very shallow oversight, but we should have a kind of a hand holding with our companies so that we can just guide them how to make the credit valuable, because it's all, it's all reputation. So if Pakistan's credit of, let's say, mangrove forest is selling at $27, and we can enhance that value by having some more ingredients. But some other credits may in other countries are at the moment at $5 per credit. So there's a large variation. So there is a, from a regulatory point of view, there's a rule as well. Besides that, these MRVs and registry and whole ecosystem is important, but the ministry would like to go a little beyond that. And this 6.4 body, they have two important panels, which actually make the whole ecosystem rules for the carbon market. One is called Methodological Expert Panel, which actually discusses the methodology. And this panel has international experts from different countries. So ministry is now trying to develop Pakistani experts to be part of this panel. They have, I think, at the moment, 16 experts at that panel, which are from different countries, from India and from other European countries. So we would like that in MEP of the 6.4 supervisory body, we should have some of our experts. We have good, although there are fewer experts, but we do have a good quality experts. So maybe we can pitch them for that body. And then there is another body which is called Accredited Expert Panel, which decides about the accreditation of different entities, national entities, who will then work on how to validate the credit, how to process the credit from a particular country. And these are called designated operational entities. And we would like that from Pakistan also. Few of the DOEs are here, are part of the accredited panel. Now we have one entity which has been based in India, has been approved as a DOE in the last supervisory body meeting, and there are other pending applications which will be taken up in the next meeting, which is scheduled in July. So we would like that maybe this is called the whole ecosystem. Once we have all these specialists also from Pakistan part of this whole global ecosystem, then I think we will be able to leverage the real credits worth for Pakistan. Besides that, there is also an important message that I would like to now convey through this webinar to all those who are part of the CDM mechanism, earlier mechanism under Kyoto Protocol, Clean Development Mechanism, that now deadline for transitioning their project to 6.4 is coming. So we have given Ministry of Climate Change has also requested them to please make your application now, because December 2025 would be the last date. After that, no transition will be allowed and all those CDM mechanism will be redundant. So we have to, all the projects which are under CDM has to transition. So the process is that they have to get an accreditation from the host party, and then they can apply to the supervisory body. So that is another important thing. And the last thing that I would like, that basically, the crux of this leveraging carbon market is developing high quality projects. And we are already working with different stakeholders. And with us, we have Spark 6, which is supporting government of Pakistan in developing our carbon markets and developing the whole ecosystem. And we would like that maybe we are in the process of setting up our own delivery unit in the ministry to help our provinces, to help our private sector to come up with a good high quality carbon projects. And that delivery unit, we have also discussions held with the World Bank, that World Bank will provide us a global expertise through Zoom or through virtually. They can, vet our projects, carbon projects, and help us make our projects more, stronger in terms of value, bringing good value for money. And also, we are taking few of our projects to FFD4, which is going to be held in Spain in June, early July. This is one of the biggest climate investment forum in terms of attracting investments for climate and carbon projects. And some of the projects we have already finalized, but we need good projects which have completed their feasibility in all aspects. So if any of you have any projects who are listening to this webinar, please do contact us, share with us. I'll ask the organizers to share our email address, so that you can send our concept note and feasibility of your projects, and we can include that project into the seminar that will be the conference that will be holding in Spain in June. So we can do that. Besides that, we are now also preparing a pipeline of projects from our own, and we also have a facility from Spark 6 if you have a project, if you have an idea where you are facing some shortage of, technical input, you can contact us and we can also support you with developing that project. So I think broadly, a policy you have already read, and Maha has also in detail shared that. I would like to focus on those things where ministry can help our carbon market players to come up with high quality projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zulfikar Saab, and you've actually answered my follow-on questions, of which I'm grateful. That first of all, we have international regional presence, and also people who need to address or to reach out to MOCC to take the projects forward. You'll be kind enough to share that detail, which we'll disseminate to all the partners. And I just like to add before we move on that our international development finance partners are quite excited when they saw the policy draft and the final policy. And they too have the same questions. So we'll be very happy to refer those to you and for your kind assistance in that regard. I would love to ask you more questions, but in the interest of time, I'll move to Ms. Fatma Khalid, who's the climate advisor for FCDO. Fatma, this is in continuation of the current discussion, and where is that the international partnerships are going to be a key element of of integrating Pakistan's financial markets into the global carbon market. Now, if we were to ask you that a development partner like FCDO, how can FCDO play a role in strengthening this process and the development of the carbon market, and extending that with your experience of working with FCDO, how other DFIs can also participate and how should they be approached by industries or industry project developers who want to reach out to them?
Thank you, Guraya Saab, and I would also like to thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to speak here. It's quite a good panel, I would say, and echoing the comments made on the report as well. It's quite a good report. Maha, as Hassan Saab said, it's very accessible and very easy to read. Graisab, getting back to your question, I think I'm going to start off with the development sector cliche, I fear, which is that development sectors, particularly in this area, such as FCDO, would be playing a supporting role as opposed to coming in as core developers of the projects. And this would be in the setup of the institutional framework. We've heard a lot about the work that the MOCC has done developing the carbon credits framework, and also the global framework that already exists that continues to inform voluntary carbon market developments in Pakistan and other countries. So there is quite a lot of resources and a lot of central resources that can be drawn from, and that development partners can be used as sort of a connecting tool for. When it comes specifically to the UK government and to FCDO, we've seen that it has been quite a strong proponent of high integrity carbon credits, and it supports actions that would unlock high integrity voluntary carbon and nature markets. It's highly supportive of the ICVCM and the VCMI, which have been referred to before, and they quite clearly state what guidelines you need to follow and what standards you need to follow in order to qualify your credit as a high integrity credit. And that those are both open source resources that private sector players and pretty much other nonprofit players can draw on when they're developing their projects. In terms of other development partners, which I'll very briefly touch on before I'll come to what FCDO in specific to Pakistan is doing, development partners already have quite a noticeable footprint when it comes to providing the technical assistance or addressing the technical assistance gaps that you also referred to, and that the report also talks about when it comes to operationalizing the carbon credit market and developing carbon credit projects in Pakistan. and Maha, I think, also covered it in her presentation. The World Bank, for instance, has supported the MOCC quite extensively on the Partnership for Market Implementation, which is where the registry has been developed through. Then you have the UNEP, the United Nations Environmental Program, which has supported or funded the Spark program, the Spark 6 program, which is basically operationalizing Article 6 in Pakistan. And then also ADB, which hasn't been mentioned before, but they also have a key facility on on helping with Article 6 readiness and preparation. And so there is quite a noticeable footprint. And I think what needs to sort of happen in order to make this kind of technical assistance more effective is that this process needs to be a demand-led process where a lot of these development partners are poised to respond to bespoke needs as opposed to a blanket approach. So all the different partners have different value adds or different comparative advantages that need to be drawn from. And so and for instance, again referring back to what FCDO can offer is we have different central programs that can help with further strengthening the registry or the MRV process. For instance, by introducing the Earth observation software. But also we have local bilateral programs such as CIFPAC, which Hassan Saab referred to, the Climate Investment Facility for Pakistan, which can help with project preparation and feasibility studies. SEED, which is also FCDO funded, has done quite a lot of work in KP, again, which Hassan Saab referred to. But we also have other programs which have pilot tested projects in nature-based solutions and waste management programs. We have the Water Resources Accounting in Pakistan program, which has implemented a lot of nature-based solutions at the community level in GB and KP and proven to be quite successful. And so learnings from those programs can help sort of inform the project pipeline development at a general national level. But we also have the waste management pilot program through the subnational governance, where we've tested again on a regional level, how waste management can be made more effective, and that can have also knock-on effects on mitigation in general and generating carbon credits. I will also take the liberty to sort of build on this before I hand over back to you, Kuraya Saab, is that I think a couple of important points that Zulfikar Saab also mentioned in terms of oversight and reputational risks when it comes to attracting international players to Pakistan. And that's a very important point to make. The framework does refer to transparency and due diligence. And I think this needs to be underscored because investors that we speak to or that we engage with reputational risk tends to be one of their main concerns. And this we've seen this with the limited projects on carbon credits that we have developed so far in Pakistan, where investors have complained about the lack of information about the nature of the credits, but also how the revenues are being shared with the communities or giving back to the communities. And this becomes even more important because we see a lot of disclosure laws coming into place around carbon credits, particularly in the US and Europe, which means that there will be a lot of closer public scrutiny over the use of carbon credits. And finally, yeah, I will just say that the greater due diligence will also sort of help reduce transaction costs and times for companies that are looking to invest in Pakistan. So that process of registering ITMOs needs to be fully transparent, and due diligence information needs to be made publicly available. I'll pause here and back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Padma, and absolutely right. The due diligence work done by others, if it's publicly available, will add and cut down a lot of time. Also, since we also look at it from a very investor perspective, the world of DFI, DF, GAF, FCDO, and DFC, it may seem very hard for the private sector to penetrate into. So that integration would probably be also something that the development agencies may want to look at this extraordinary moment where we are opening up and operationalizing this market. So moving on, Ibrahim Khan Saab is the Director of Forest at WWF. WWF is a very unique organization, as I have gotten to know it recently. And in that context, Ibrahim Saab, nature-based solutions that we spoke of in the earlier discussion, we were talking of KPK and other areas, particularly forestry projects, ARR, offer a very significant opportunity within the carbon market. And that's a space where I think it's neglected and not a lot of knowledge is there. So now, with the contribution of both mitigation, adaptation, deforestation efforts have potential for generating credits and also demystifying them as to what they are. I'd like to request you, with your deep knowledge, to share with the audience and the panels what you think is missing and how this particular policy in operationalizing can take advantage of your learnings.
Thank you, Garaisa, for giving me this opportunity. I would like to throw light and also come into, bring into your knowledge that Pakistan has significant potential regarding forestry sector and afforestation, reforestation. Like we have 9 different forest types, starting from mangroves up till to the alpine and subalpine scrub forest. So they present enormous potential, and on top of that, like though we have different issues, but those issues also present potential for carbon credits and climate mitigation efforts. Like we have deforestation, high rate of deforestation. Like according to our estimates from 2016 to 2020, we found that the annual deforestation rate was 10,000 hectares per year. And also the forest degradation rate, which for the first time we developed a methodology and like estimated it for the Ministry of Climate Change. And we found that 157,000 hectares of nature forests are degraded every year. So it's though it's a big loss, it's it's our it's not a good thing, but they present also opportunity for developing carbon credit projects and filling this gap through afforestation, reforestation, and restoration of our nature forest ecosystems. We have diverse forest ecosystem as well as the diverse habitats for our unique flora and fauna and biodiversity. We have different ecosystems that present extremely unique habitats for snow leopards, for like markhors and brown bears and black bears. These are some of the unique species, and some are endemic to our region. So we can build on them, and we can restore the biodiversity along with the carbon credits, and we can increase the quality of our carbon credit projects and our climate mitigation efforts. So these are the potentials, and apart from them, we have the vast rangelands, more than 47 million hectares of rangelands we have, and they are mostly concentrated in Balochistan, which is also a very deprived area, and they present potential of carbon credits projects and they can be developed there. We have quite good chunk of irrigated lands, and we can develop irrigated plantations there. 50% of our agricultural land is irrigated, and that's a good potential where we can work on the farm forestry projects also.
I want to build on what Zulfikar said, Ibrahim Saab, a little earlier, which is the development of quality bankable PDDs. Now, from that perspective, the area of forestry is something where there is potential, but what mechanism or what approaches should a private sector take to enter into or develop this particular develop a particular ARR project? and utilize your services so that they can lead to the generation of carbon credits for trading under the system that we are looking at doing. It's a fairly large area that is currently not on the radar of a lot of commercial investors.
Yes, it should be we have different shortcomings also in our forestry sector. Though we developed the national forest reference emission levels and the sub-national level GHG inventories also, but we lack our own tier 3 and tier 2 methodologies here, and we lack different our own aromatic equation, which should be worked on and should be developed, and we need develop our own methodology. So that's a big shortcoming, and that need to be fulfilled.
Well, thank you very much, Hassan. I know I'm over time, and I'm gonna pass this back to you now.
Thank you to our panelists, and thank you, Mr. Naveed, for such a wonderful discussion. And to our panelists, I would like to request that we have a few questions, which unfortunately we can't take live right now because the second session is about to begin. So if you guys could see the Q&A box on your screens, and if you could answer the questions that are relevant to you, that would be really helpful to our attendees. And once again, thank you so much, Naveed Saab, and thank you so much to everybody else. And now I would like to request Mr. Ali Akbar Ghangro to join us for the second panel. He'll be moderating the panel called Leveraging Carbon Markets for Scaling Up Private Sector Investment in Pakistan. Mr. Ali, he's currently a Senior Manager, Research, Marketing and Communications at Karandas. He has, in the past 14 years, Ali Akbar has worked in various capacities in non-profits, think tanks, and the government in both Pakistan and Canada. He was also associated with the Pakistan Microfinance Network as Research Manager and Ministry of Finance, Government of British Columbia as Tax Policy Consultant. His areas of interest include public finance, public-private partnerships, and financial inclusion. Our panelists, I believe, are joining us as I speak. I'll start with Ms. Salima Hemani, who is Head of Sustainability at BASF Pakistan. She is a seasoned professional with over 20 years of experience in corporate finance, sustainable strategy, ESG reporting, and stakeholder engagement. And next up, we have William Ten Zichthoff, who is the co-founder of Carbify, a pioneering company in certified carbon offset solutions aligned with UNFCCC guidelines. He has a strong background in ecology and business development. He also played a key role in creating the world's first certified carbon debt. Next up, we have Umar Ghaznavi, who informed us that he is running a bit late, but he'll be joining us shortly. He's an entrepreneur with over 15 years of experience in business development and finance. He has worked in investment banking and the energy sector before pioneering projects in Pakistan's waste to energy and municipal solid waste management, achieving an impressive 70% waste repurposing rate. And lastly, we have Hugh Salve, who's a Senior Director for Market Development and Partnerships at Gold Standard, which is one of the world's leading carbon crediting standards with over 3,000 projects in more than 100 countries worldwide. In this role, Hugh is responsible for Gold Standard's partnerships with the government, corporate, investment, and project development communities, as well as leading work on capacity building, advocacy, and initiatives to strengthen the integrity of carbon markets for the future. And with that, I will hand over the mic and the quorum to Ali.
Thank you, Hassan. So in this panel, we will explore ways to incentivize businesses to engage in carbon trading, address barriers to market participation, establish credibility for Pakistan's standing in the global markets. For this panel, as Hassan has already introduced the panelists, we have industry leaders, sustainability experts that will discuss how their organizations are incorporating carbon offset strategies and what further regulatory support is needed to enhance market growth. We will also discuss the potential for voluntary as well as compliance-based carbon trading and how Pakistani businesses can integrate these models into their operations. I am hopeful that this discussion will provide clarity on investment opportunities, risk mitigation strategies, and long-term vision for scaling carbon credit initiatives in Pakistan's private sector. Salima, I'll start with you. So as we know, BASF BASF, I apologize, is a global leader in the chemicals sector with strong commitment to sustainability and environmental stewardship. In Pakistan, its sustainability initiative focus on integrating innovative solutions to reduce the carbon footprint of various industries. Given this context, how do you think financial mechanisms and support systems enhance business participation, particularly in the industrial sector that we're talking about, with regards to carbon markets? And from BASF's perspective, what role do you see the organization like yours can play in bridging the gap between policy development and on-the-ground implementation of carbon credit strategies?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. So first of all, we've been discussing that how now we are moving towards a carbon market mechanism, which is again a very, very strong mechanism to push corporates and businesses towards decarbonization and hence achieving, this carbon reduction mechanism. But in order for the carbon markets also to thrive, we need, like the right products, we need the right mechanisms, but equally important is the financial system and structures alongside the policy frameworks and guidelines. So it is very heartening to see that the State Bank, and people have talked about it before, that State Bank has come up with the green taxonomy draft and it's in the works. And then the federal government has also issued the draft guidelines for carbon trading. But in order for the carbon trading to thrive, there is a lot of work that, as private sector, we also need to do. And first of all is, working with the public sector. And right now is the time where we can look at these drafts and give our input and very strongly work with them for the implementation phase as well. So from BSF point of view, see, like you mentioned that, very focused on sustainability. So we have our own goals and targets whereby we want to be net zero by 2050. And for that, we have a carbon management program that guides our efforts. But, for us, our motto is that we create chemistry for a sustainable future. So we believe in the power of science, innovation, technology to find the solutions. And keeping that in mind, we want to not only decarbonize ourselves, but be an active player in the ecosystem for our customers. So largely where we come in, we are developing products that can enable our customers to transition towards net zero. So, our portfolio has products which are low carbon footprint products. So we call them the low PCF products. Then we also have products which, are built on the circular economy principles. So when I talk about low carbon footprint products, what we are developing is research-based products which use either circular feedstock, bio-based feedstock, renewable energy as feedstock, and then they are there's this whole methodology as to how the carbon footprint is mapped. So what we bring on the table is not just innovative products, which are very high quality and can help the companies to switch from high emission products to low emission products, but also the data is verifiable. So when we talk about carbon markets, transparency, verifiability is very, very important. So companies like BSF can come in, provide that data, and most of our products are also internationally accredited. So, that's a very, very important part because robust MRV is, like everybody said, is very, very important. So then we also have the technical expertise. We have access to a lot of methodologies like, the LCA methodology. I talked about the biomass balance methodology to calculate, etc. So companies like ourselves will help the companies to switch and, greening their scope 3 emissions. And that's where the carbon market and Maha was also talking about innovative products. There's the plain vanilla products. We need to focus on the additionality. And that's where BSF comes in. So in short, we need the policy guidelines, financial mechanisms, but we also need the products that can help the customers to transition towards net zero.
Excellent. That was very good. And hopefully you can pave the path for the private sector as well in Pakistan. With this, I'll turn to you, Hugh Salve, who's part of Gold Standard, which is a global leader in setting carbon credit standards. The organization has over 3,000 projects spanning more than 100 countries. So, Hugh, from you, we want to understand a journey of a jurisdiction that is very similar to Pakistan. So Pakistan it is in its nascency. It has just developed its framework. And can you sort of walk us through another jurisdiction's journey that is perhaps like Pakistan, and how did they develop the carbon markets with respect to policy and regulation, and what sort of incentives were in place for the industry?
Thank you. And it's really good to be here. So just for anyone who's not familiar with Gold Standard, we're one of the standard setters in the carbon market. So the 3,000 projects that have been mentioned, these are projects across the world that use our standard in order to deliver and quantify the impact that they are having for the climate, but also for sustainable development. And we then issue carbon credits to them. So many of the carbon credits circulating in the carbon market are ones which Gold Standard has issued. And that includes for 12 projects which are registered in Pakistan currently. So last year as Gold Standard, we launched something that we called a carbon market regulation tracker, which is a tracker on our website that lists all of the regulations across the world that are related to carbon credits. And one of the things that's really striking with this is just how many of them are, how many of these regulations were created in the last few years. So if you go back a few years, there really weren't many regulations which affected the voluntary carbon market directly. This is changing a lot around the world. And for that reason, there isn't so much one jurisdiction I can point to and say this is the long path that this jurisdiction has taken to get to where it is now, because many countries across the world are now starting to think more deliberately about how they want to support a voluntary market and how they want a voluntary market within their country to work for them. So Pakistan's kind of not so much behind many others really on this. There's a lot of countries which are at the start of the journey. But there are already a few lessons that we as Gold Standard can draw out from experiences that we're seeing globally. And I'll just list a few of them now. One of them is think internationally. So when you're thinking about the voluntary market in particular, you're typically thinking about international buyers. So buyers of carbon credits, which are based outside of Pakistan in most cases. And those buyers will know certain standards and know certain ways of the market working. And so where we've seen regulations that are helpful for the voluntary market's growth is where there is a recognition and acceptance of existing standards that are familiar with buyers and others in the market. And where we seen things being more disruptive is where there is a more protectionist approach which is taken and maybe some uncertainty about whether projects can carry on working. So thinking internationally is quite important if you want to generate the impact which is possible under the voluntary market. At the same time, you want value to stay within the country. And there's some really interesting examples that we've seen of how policymakers are trying to build up local expertise to make sure that there is the right expertise within the country to be able to support a growing carbon market. And an example of that is Ghana, which has introduced a requirement that for every Article 6 project in the country, there needs to be at least one local expert on the validation or verification team. And that's a way to try to build up local expertise in auditing and make sure that over time there is more local expertise. Maybe auditing firms kind of get set up in the country, which can then support projects in the future. And so thinking about ways to build up local expertise and make sure it's not all international is something which is quite important. Nextly, thinking about how you want to steer voluntary action. So the voluntary carbon market is essentially driven by what buyers want. Buyers will have certain preferences for SBTi compliance or because this is the types of project that they want. But policymakers can also do some work to steer this through their regulatory framework and through saying that these are the types of projects that we will authorize under Article 6. These are the types of projects that we would like to see in the voluntary market counting towards our target. And so some steering can really help investors to understand what types of projects will be supported by the government and can also help make sure that projects in the market are aligned with the development goals and the climate goals of the government. And then I think the final thing which I would say is think about the best way to use the fiscal policy. So many governments, when they're looking at the voluntary market and looking at carbon markets, are thinking about tax. They're thinking about how we can extract revenue from projects. But it's important to remember that this is investment you want. This is investment to try to deliver emission reductions, to create jobs, to deliver sustainable development benefits. And so you don't want to tax this at a level where it becomes unattractive to carry on operating in the government, in the country. And so we've seen examples where governments are reasonably making sure that there is the right level of levy, which is charged on projects, but also examples where governments are using fiscal policy to incentivize projects and incentivize carbon credit transactions. So Singapore, for instance, has exempted carbon credit transactions from VAT because this is something that they want to encourage. So fiscal policy is powerful. It can act as a deterrent to investment, but it can also act to support it. There's a long list which I could go on beyond that, but there are some really interesting examples of steps which have been taken across the world, which can act as a model for Pakistan. But there's also a lot of new and novel and innovative work that can be done to try to create and incentivize the voluntary market that works best for Pakistan's circumstances.
Excellent, Hugh. Thank you very much. That was very good. With this, I'll go back to industry, to Umar, who's from Davam. Davam focuses on, he's the co-founder of Davam, as Hassan has already introduced him. Davam, the company focuses on developing sustainable business models, integrating circular economy principles, and driving innovation. Given this focus, Umar, how can circular economy models and sustainable practices be effectively aligned with carbon trading opportunities in Pakistan? And what sort of innovative financing mechanisms could help unlock private sector investments in carbon credits, particularly in emerging markets like Pakistan? And from your experience, could you elaborate on the role of technology as well?
Right. Thank you so much, Leopold. First of all, I'd like to kind of highlight the experiences that we've had in the past 8 to 10 years working on waste management, solar, waste to energy projects. And now we're working with Dawam Life, where we have created refill stations for the FMCG sector to stop the use of the higher use of plastics. The biggest thing that I've noticed, the missing link that we have over here is that in Pakistan, generally, there is a lack of information, first of all. There is a lot of information available with the relevant departments in the government or certain industries where people are closely tied in with generating businesses that are good for the environment or can generate carbon credits in the future. But the biggest issue that we face right now, as a startup myself, not so long ago, was that whenever we did look at large-scale projects, especially in the waste management sector, there was very little in terms of information available. Unfortunately, the information lies with the larger corporates, especially the MNCs, as well as some of the government departments. But at large, if you look at the startup sector, people are looking at solutions more from a pure economic perspective, which is good, which is dictated by market forces in Pakistan. But what they're unable to do is to leverage off the work that they would be doing and the kind of impact that they would have based on the carbon markets and how it could help them finance the larger scale projects. The information isn't there because of the lack of consultants available over here. People struggle to figure out exactly what they can do with their potential projects. And lastly, I think even in the developing side of projects, nobody is really paying great attention unless it's a large reforestation or afforestation project or a large solar power or wind power project, which are usually run by larger enterprises. The creativity in the market, I feel, comes from the smaller companies, the startups, whereas the knowledge lies with the larger entities, which may not be able to move as fast to adapt to certain things that need to be changed, keeping in mind climate change right now. So we have to find some sort of balance where information sharing happens a lot easier, where the creative side of things, of business in Pakistan in particular, and other developing countries is able to link up with the knowledge base, both from international consultants, as well as with the local information base that exists in Pakistan. So it's a long journey. It's not that simple. And unfortunately, to date, I believe Pakistan has struggled with this, other than with some marquee large-scale projects. But what it also has done for other startups potentially is to open the door and leave the door open for exploring new opportunities, which larger entities might not really consider.
Thank you for this, Umar. This was very useful. Now I'll turn to William. William is from Carbify. Carbify is a very unique company. It works in the area of certifying carbon offset solutions. It works in alignment with UNFCCC guidelines and leveraging blockchain technology to enhance transparency, efficiency, and trust in carbon trading. So we'll talk on a very important technology piece that ties into carbon markets. So given this, William, what are the potential benefits of tokenized carbon credits in these emerging markets like Pakistan? And how can they increase accessibility and participation in carbon trading? Additionally, how can essentially technology-driven solutions improve the accuracy and transparency of measuring, reporting, verifying emissions, and going with the whole circle of that phases through which carbon a project goes through that of credits?
That's a whole lot of questions in one, but I will try to answer it. But let me start with the journey of Carbify, because I think that's very important why we started this. A few years ago, we had this idea to create a sustainable investment for companies or for individuals in tree planting and in carbon offset, so the facilitating of carbon trading. But the current registries out there and standard setters were not as transparent as we would have liked to see them. So we decided to start with the global carbon standards, also methodology and standard setter, which we first created. And after it was finished, we handed it over to an American NGO. But the UNFCCC, they acknowledged the work, what we did on behalf of the GCS. And they invited me to become one of the Article 6.4 mechanism experts on behalf of the Netherlands. So that's one part of it. But the focus with Carbify is we are doing and reforestation projects within the Amazon and in Angola, where we tokenize agroforestry systems. And what makes us call it carbon debits instead of a carbon credit is that our carbon debits are first being absorbed. So you can compare it with the ex-post credits. And after it's being absorbed, we issue the carbon tokens. And what makes it so unique is that we can geotag every single tree that is generating the carbon tokens. And we can link every kilo back to the original source. So that means that if Pakistan, we have a partnership with Fruits of Sustainability from Pakistan. They are doing the on-ground work in Pakistan for us. But if they, for example, find a company that wants to offset 1 ton of their scope 3 emissions, it is possible that in your, let's call it a retirement certificate, but in your carbon reduction certificate, you will have 1,000 different geolocations providing the CO2 for your carbon offset certificate. So it's the full transparency. And it's only possible with blockchain technology. Otherwise, you have to rely on Excel files or databases that can be tampered with if somebody wants that. So we want to remove. I mean, we have also seen all the news articles in The Guardian and Decide and Washington Post. We want to bring trust back in the carbon offset world. We want to educate people, but we want to do it the right way. And I think that the right way is that you start on chain and you end on chain, because then you have the whole supply chain there. And there's only the global carbon standard right now has a blockchain native registry, which is good. And we are getting a lot of questions from Pakistan if we can also do as Carbify projects in Pakistan. And that should be possible in the future, but not on a near term, because a lot of research needs to be done, because we haven't started there. But I think it opens up a lot of opportunities for companies in Pakistan, but also for projects in the future. because of that transparency, and you don't have to trust it anymore, but you can verify everything.
William, is any company making use of this blockchain technology for carbon credits? Is there any project on ground in Pakistan at the moment?
No, not yet. No, because we have been holding them back because we focused on the tech in the first place. So we want to have the foundation ready before we start onboarding other projects. But it is ready now. So it is possible for Pakistan projects to reach out to the global carbon standard and use the blockchain technology with our technical help, of course, to create carbon debits themselves.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for this. So I'll quickly turn back to Hugh before I hand it over, Hassan. So Hugh, how do you see technology and the role that it plays in establishing credibility in the market? So if Pakistan is a new entrant, and you've talked about other countries and jurisdictions that are starting off on their journey, how do you view the role of blockchain and tokenization?
So the role of technology, we think, is hugely important in general. So we launched last year a new digital MRV program. So gold standard's been in the market for 20 years. Some of the technologies that exist now didn't exist when we first started. And so we have a new program now to allow projects to use digital MRV technologies to help with the calculation of emission reductions, and for that to support carbon credits directly. So there's a lot of work which we're doing there. Blockchain is something that we've looked at quite carefully over the past few years. Our registry isn't blockchain based right now. It's one thing which we may look at in the future, whether to transition to a different system. So that's something which is still kind of open for us. I think the thing I would say is technology isn't the answer to all integrity issues and to all quality issues. So if you look at the requirements, for instance, that CORSIA, the aviation scheme, or the ICPCM are looking at, they're looking at many things about how a program is run, its governance, its approach to additionality, to permanence, the quality of the methodologies. All of these things matter. Technology can help make things more reliable and efficient, but it's got to come as part of an overall program that has integrity.
Okay, great, excellent, well said. So, I'll wrap this up right now. Carbon markets, there's no doubt that they present a significant opportunity for Pakistan to attract investments and integrate sustainability into corporate strategies. And we think by leveraging international frameworks and market-based mechanisms, the private sector can play a crucial role in the country's carbon footprint while benefiting from new investment opportunities. I'd like to thank all the panelists. Before I hand it over to Hassan, this was a very engaging and enlightening discussion, and I hope we've all learned something from it. Over to you, Hassan.
Thank you, Ali, and thank you. And thank you to all the panelists for joining us. While we wait for Ms. Aisha, the Secretary of Ministry for Climate Change, to join us, I would like to request for all the panelists if they can go through the Q&A section below and see if any question that they feel is relevant to them and can they answer it. We still have panelists with us from both panel 1 and panel 2, and we still have Ms. Maha with us. So can you guys please see and let me know if there's any question that you want to answer right now. I'll be really grateful, because honestly, we have a lot of unanswered questions. I think the number is at 56 right now, and we've answered 30. And there's a lot of interest in the webinar right now.
We actually have a question. So Salima, we have a question. It is, how can sustainability initiatives be translated into credits? And can you suggest which can be encashed by the industry, such as biomass boilers and other renewable initiatives?
I talked about, what are some of the areas. So like you talking about biomass. So what needs to be established is, and what are the rules? And so whether we talk about additionality is very, very important, then verifiability, traceability, transparency. So we need to make sure that the project that we're doing is already something which is not happened. So what is new in there? So if they're talking about biomass, I cannot answer that a particular project has additionality or not, but the short answer to that question would be then we need to understand what the rules of the carbon market are. If it's about carbon market in Pakistan, the guidelines have just been introduced, and they are working on the implementation framework, and the guidelines are there. Again, it talks about these principles. And so if you're talking about biomass boilers, but what is the end product that we are asking the credit for? So whatever that end product is, we need to prove that if the biomass boiler would not have been put into place, then what would have been the carbon footprint have been? And now we established the documentation frameworks that you also talked about, whether we are signing up for voluntary carbon markets, then there is another route. And if it's going for the compliance market, then we need to look at Paris Agreement, Article 6, etc. So first we need to establish that what particular project is trying to achieve, and what is the reduction or avoidance that we're going to achieve. I know this is a whole science in itself, but it's a very short time. But I hope the person got the answer in terms of relevance of the project.
We have another one that perhaps you or Omar could answer. There's a question on on how viable is the ROI based business model for Pakistan, focusing on carbon markets, and if the risks associated and challenges could be discussed.
I'll take some part of that. Look, the risks and challenges exist. We all know how many challenges companies face in Pakistan. It's not really the easiest place in the world to do business right now. However, the opportunities do exist. And just a couple of minutes ago, Salima was mentioning that it's about additionality. I think being able to actually put down something where you can put down on paper what's actually happening to the environment right now, rather than creating a project where you don't actually know the baseline that exists. I think this is where we miss out a lot. That's why I was mentioning that there's a lack of information. There are several great low-hanging opportunities in the past 10 years in my work in energy efficiency, solar, etc. There are even in the report, there are multiple industries that have been laid out, and you've shown in that very well the kind of opportunities that exist for each industry out there, from agriculture to power provision to energy efficiency, fuel management. These are all things which don't only impact the environment and can help you with the carbon credits, and it is viable. Trust me, if you're able to do a large scale project and get the necessary carbon funding through it, it is extremely helpful. As it is, resources for getting these kind of projects funded right now are limited. It's more angled towards technology companies, high tech companies. And while carbon-related projects do incorporate technology, they don't come in the same realm as these high-tech industries. So the opportunities exist. It's the financing and foreign consultants exist. It's a matter, I believe, it's more a matter of bridging that gap of information. I said that before as well. The opportunities are out there. It's just about linking the right people together, maybe creating forums where people can discuss different opportunities. Because right now, everybody's looking at the obvious projects that are out there. Everybody looks at solar or growing trees predominantly.
Forestation, yes.
Yes.
Forestation.
Waste management, waste recycling, energy efficiency, fuel efficiency. These are things where technologies already exist. Companies in Pakistan are developing alternative solutions for these issues, and it is very easily quantifiable with literally decades and decades of data available. So creating that baseline becomes a lot easier. I'm sure one of the consulting companies will be able to give you more details on how to create that baseline and what all is required. But from my experience in doing a biogas project in the past with K Electric, or trying to do it, and figuring out how difficult it is to create that baseline in a project which has never existed in a country like this, and the lack of data, maybe we look at the projects which are low-hanging fruits initially, where the data is available, it's quantifiable, and it's verifiable. As long as it's verifiable and easily quantifiable, I think it'll become a lot easier for companies to develop projects that can gain the necessary carbon credits. And yes, it is very, very viable for companies to do that, especially in large scale large-scale infrastructure projects.
There is another question on ETS. William, if you can answer this one, is blockchain used in ETS?
I think ETS should have a bigger impact in carbon markets in regions like Pakistan, especially where industries have primary focus. And unlike the voluntary carbon markets, ETS mandates emission reductions, of course. And right now it's not utilizing blockchain technology, but it should.
Thank you.
Just to add, one of the so in the EU, one of the things being looked at right now is a new carbon removal certification framework, which is a new framework for carbon removals, which may be linked to the EU ETS in the future. And in that, they're looking seriously at whether the blockchain is the right technology for a registry solution. So it's something that's being looked at in that context.
To all the panelists, if anybody wants to take this question, this is what will be the impact of agri income tax on carbon credit market and adoption of climate-friendly agriculture practices in Pakistan?
If I can take the question.
Yeah, sure, Naveen, go.
So there are two different questions here. One is on the tax side, where I think it's hard for me to comprehend how that would done. Maybe there is a way. On the other side, on the agri practices, certainly, Salim sir was talking about rice production earlier. The methane produced out of that, the production that can be the agriculture practice there is something that can be changed, and there is clearly some carbon credit potential there. Likewise, we're talking about the afforestation projects, and then of course there's the plantation between trees as well. That can add to carbon reduction. So there are a number of those areas. Perhaps there can be more academic at this stage, but these are two different questions. That's how I would distinguish between the two.
And just to add, in terms of agriculture, a lot of focus is on resilience aspect of so we're looking at carbon avoidance. So nowadays you must have heard about biochar. So because this is more of a carbon avoidance project, again something which is called the black gold for the soil. So there are lots of interesting projects, and the price goes very high. So and something which is which adds to the additionality, and something very much which Pakistan can look into. India is big on biochar credits. So course, like Naveed said, that the tax aspect I'm not going to comment on, but there are lots of agriculture related practices that can be very much relevant for carbon credits for sure.
So now I'd like to welcome Ms. Aisha Humaira, who is the Secretary for Ministry of Climate Change. She will provide us with a strategic view on carbon credits market development. During her 30 years of service, Ms. Aisha has worked on various key positions in the federal government, including Economic Affairs Division, Ministry of Food Security, and Economic Counselor, Pakistan Mission to the WTO. She has been dealing with international trade matters as well as bilateral trade with the US, European Union, Central Asia, Africa, and Middle East. Over to you, Ms. Aisha.
Thank you very much. And I'm really grateful to Karandas for organizing this session and engaging Ministry of Climate Change in this dialogue. I think it's extremely important that we have more and more sessions on this subject to create awareness and better understanding that what are carbon markets, how can we operationalize them. Actually, after the COP29, more momentum has been added in these conversations, 6 in the COP. And before even going to the COP, Ministry of Climate Change was working on the guidelines for carbon trading. And we had extensive consultations with the provinces and with all the stakeholders, including the private sector. And those guidelines are now approved by the cabinet and available on ministry's website. Now it is up to the private sector, provincial governments to really make use of this opportunity. And there is mixed feedback. Some would say that don't rely too much on carbon markets. It is not the cake, it's cherry on the top. But at the same time, I would say that Pakistan is a country which has huge potential, because here we don't really have a lot of forests, but we have huge potential for mitigation activities and reduction of GHG emissions through various initiatives, such as biogas, methane reduction, and similarly several other projects can be initiated by encouraging energy efficient use of technology and changing behaviors, attitudes, and even use of new technology. And for example, fan is a very simple example that the way in our country we adopted energy saving bulbs has not yet happened to the fan. So we do need few entrepreneurs coming forward and making use of this change in technology. NICA has made the standards, technology is available, fan manufacturers are there. So we need a building bridge and an initiative from entrepreneurs and the financing arrangement to be there so that this conversion happens quickly. Similarly, there are so many other initiatives which provide an opportunity to make this transition win-win by removing GHG emissions from the environment and also creating climate finance. So this part of the carbon trading market is something that we really want to develop and move forward. Within the carbon dialogue, there is also a lot of emphasis on putting carbon taxes, but Ministry of Climate Change has been of the view that first of all, we have to operationalize carbon credit markets and let the private sector get the benefit of these opportunities and raise climate finance through carbon credit markets. And maybe when we are mature enough, then we would be in a position to move in that direction. And we really want the private sector to come forward and make use of the voluntary carbon markets. We are also in touch with some of the countries bilaterally who are interested in G2G arrangements. And we are in the process of developing our national registry. Rules and regulations are part of the overall framework, and they are at a draft stage. So this quarter is really exciting time for us, and we hope that by the end of April, we would be in a position to start making transactions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Aisha, for taking out the time and joining us. It was really wonderful to see you, taking time out of a busy schedule and to join us. And now I would like to request Ms. Jo Moyer to join us, who will be delivering the closing remarks for this webinar. Ms. Jo is currently serving as the Development Director for British High Commission in Islamabad, where she oversees the UK government's development partnership and portfolio of investments with Pakistan. Prior to this, she was FCDO's Deputy Director for Human Development during the COVID pandemic, leading a range of global health policies and programs, including on health systems, nutrition, climate and health, and sexual and reproductive health and rights. Over to you, Ms. Jo.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. And first of all, just to say huge thanks to Bakas and the Karandas team, to Salim Saab, and of course to Madam Secretary for her inspiring words there. It's so encouraging to see how much progress Pakistan has made. Listen, thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate it. And I was only able to join the last hour of the discussions, but I thought the panel was really, really interesting and provided a lot of great sort of technical know-how on how to actually exploit the carbon markets properly. And as Madam Secretary said, this is an enormous area of potential for Pakistan. The UK, for our part, has been a big advocate for initiatives that drive green economic growth here in Pakistan. It's a huge part of what we do here through our development partnership. And of course, what we hope in the future is that the UK and Pakistan will have much thicker and deeper trading partnerships and networks for investment, including in the green space. As part of our commitment to Pakistan's economic sustainability, we've been a long-standing partner in supporting the financial sector here, particularly addressing the needs of MSMEs and underserved businesses. And some of you may know that we've played a key role in establishing institutions such as, of course, wonderful Karandas, but also some of the subsidiaries in Frizamin, Pakistan Microfinance Investment Company, Avaz Financial Services, and the National Credit Guarantee Company. And through these initiatives, we've supported over 1 million jobs and helped more than 50,000 SMEs to start and expand their businesses. And we're really proud of that track record. But as we've been discussing today, economic growth can't be sustained unless we look at the growing threat of climate change. I arrived in Pakistan during the floods of 2022, and they were absolutely devastating and a really stark reminder of Pakistan's vulnerability, and also actually the financial implications. I think the bill in terms of the loss and damage from those floods and what was needed to rebuild was about $30 billion. The UK has supported a study by Boston Consulting Group and in partnership with the government of Pakistan that estimates by 2050, the cost of inaction on climate change in agriculture alone, so this is just in agriculture, could reach 200 billion USD. So that means if we do nothing to adapt to climate change in the agriculture sector, it could cost $200 billion. So it's really important we look now to those interventions that can help adapt and build resilience to droughts, floods, extreme heat, all these more extreme weather events that reduce crop yields. And in fact, the same study said that by 2050, some of the staple crops like wheat and rice could be reduced in terms of yield by up to 47%, with Sindh and Punjab, of course, being the provinces most affected by those potential losses. So all to say that the time to act is now on adaptation and resilience. And the carbon markets, of course, can play a key role in helping to unlock the much needed climate finance for that. So as part of our partnership here in Pakistan, we've been targeting specifically that issue of unlocking private sector climate finance with a strong focus on how we can use our development capital to de-risk private sector investment. And I'm delighted that we were able to launch our new climate finance program, SIFPAC, in partnership with the IFC, but also others, which is looking specifically at doing that, building a pipeline of bankable investments in the private with private sector investment crowded in by development finance. And I'm also really confident that institutions like Karandas will play an important role in addressing climate challenges by offering innovative and sustainable financial products in the future. Watch this space is all I will say on that. The development of high integrity carbon markets, as many of the speakers have pointed out today, is one of those key areas that I think will really help unlock climate finance. And if structured correctly, the carbon markets can help countries like Pakistan attract much needed investment and accelerate decarbonisation. But it's really critical those carbon markets are transparent, credible and inclusive, as many of the colleagues have said here today. And also, wearing my development director hat, we need to ensure that the revenues and the benefits from the carbon markets reach those most affected by climate change, the farmers, the communities and the businesses on the front lines. It's also really important that where we're using the carbon markets, the interventions actually must lead to permanent and irreversible reductions in greenhouse gas emissions rather than just being a temporary offset mechanism. But what I've heard today is a lot of expertise and encouragement that these are all issues that this group of people is thinking about, and I'm encouraged that we can find a way forward together. So finally, as a long-standing development partner of Pakistan, I just wanted to reaffirm the UK's commitment to supporting green growth and climate resilience ambitions in this country. But we also know that no single organisation or entity can solve this challenge alone. Not government, not the private sector alone, not development partners. It really will take all of us working together, coordinating to address these challenges and to close that gap in terms of climate finance that is needed. So the time to act is now. As I say, let's collaborate across the public and private sectors and build a sustainable, low-carbon future for Pakistan. So once again, thank you so much for having me. It's been a real privilege to listen in to some of the discussions today, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Jo, for your wonderful comments on this. And on that note, I would like to thank everybody who joined us, from all the attendees to all the participants and panelists, Salim Saab, Mr. Vakas, Ms. Jo, Ms. Aisha. And I would also like to point out that we have uploaded the report on our website from where you can download it. And if you still have any, I know that we were unable to answer all the questions, so I will once again mention my email ID. It is hassan.saeed@karandas.com.pk. Please feel free to reach out if you have any further comments or any questions regarding our study, and we'll be happy to help you out. And on this note, I would like to say, once again, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you very much, Hassan. Thank you, Chair, Jo, Madam Secretary. Extremely grateful for your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.